Hey all, Occida here. Today I have a little bit more of a light-hearted video for you guys. I wanted to go through all the maps that are in Flood Escape 2, and I wanted to just give my opinion on all of them and go ahead and make a tier list on all of them, just to let you guys know which maps I think outshine the rest, and pretty much put them all in comparison to one another. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Just wanted to do something fun. Before we get started, I wanted to bring up a few caveats though. As of recording this, which is December 17th, 2020, there might be more maps in the future that are added to the game that I might not consider for the tier list, and while I really can't predict the future, what I can do is put in a couple of the maps that I think are most likely to get into the game next. Those maps would be Autumn Bridge and Magmatic Mines, which I'll also be rating on the tier list. If you're wondering about Electroblast's maps, I'm actually not going to put his in the tier list because I'm not so confident that he's been in cahoots with Crazy Blocks, and if I do eat my words on that, I'll definitely leave a comment in the comment section down below explaining where I would put his maps, but otherwise, I'm going to leave them off the list for now. Second of all, I'm going to be rating the maps based on all the factors that they have in play. I'm not going to look at just the design or just the gameplay. I'm going to look at everything from the OST to how unique the map is, if it's fun, if it looks good, if there's any shortcuts, generally how the map fits all together as one package deal. Third of all, within each tier, I'm going to be rating maps from best to worst on left to right. So, as an example, if I put Abandoned Facility up here on the very left, and I put Blue Moon on the very right of S tier, that would mean within the S tier, I would think that Abandoned Facility is better than Blue Moon. That's just an example, that's not actually what I think, but you'll go ahead and see that in a few moments. And finally, I wanted to remind you guys that this is honestly my personal opinion, and if you guys disagree with me at all, or if you wanted to talk about anything, please leave a comment down below. I really love hearing from you guys and trying to discuss with you guys, so if you have any sort of ideas to bring up, or if you had any sort of discrepancy you wanted to discuss about the tier list, go ahead and talk to me in the comment section below. I read all the comments, and I would love to hear from you guys. So without further ado, we're going to start with the F tier. We're going from bottom to top. And honestly, I never wanted to put anything into the F tier, but there's only one map, a map that ironically also starts with F, that I would put in the F tier. That map's going to be Fallen. Fallen is, in my opinion, is not a Flood Escape map. It feels like something that I would play in a difficulty chart obby. It feels like something, well, understandably from the creator, apparently he put it together in 6 hours. It feels like it was rushed together in 6 hours. It does not feel fun. There's hardly any interaction. It's the same platform copied and pasted several times over. And I suppose the best way to put it is that there's no way that anyone besides Crazy would be able to put this map into the game. I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, if someone else were to make the map and Crazy were to look at it, he would immediately reject it. He would say, no, this should not be in Flood Escape. And that's why I think it fails as a map, and that's why it's the only map in the F tier. Starting in the D tier, I know I'm going to make a lot of enemies here, but as the second worst map, I'm going to put Castle Tides. Why is Castle Tides down here? It's a boring map. There's not a lot of good ways to put it. It's simply boring. There's not a lot going on visually. There's not a lot going on for the gameplay. If you wanted to, and you had everyone else get the buttons, you could honestly complete the map without jumping a single time. And there's a couple maps that I can say that about. Actually, I don't think there are. I think this is the only map where I can say you can win the map without jumping at all if other people get the buttons. And aside from that, the only thing that's noteworthy about the map that I see is the amount of Z-fighting. What is Z-fighting? Well, if you go into Studio and you put two parts that have a texture or material inside of each other, you can see as the game kind of glitches out and switches back and forth very rapidly between the two objects. You can see pretty much it looks like the parts are flickering. And there's, at least I play on Graphics 10, but I see that there are several parts of the map where there's Z-fighting, where the textures are glitching. And also there are a few other things like the final door of the map rising up, and you can see like the edges of the door because it's like super duper wide. It's honestly a little bit awkward, and the map definitely needs a lot of polish if I wanted to put it any higher than second to last. Another map I'm going to be putting down here is Decrepit Seas. I personally like Decrepit Seas a lot, but I can understand that it's not the most flattering map gameplay-wise. There's not a lot of bad things I can say about Decrepit Seas, but I really can't say anything good about Decrepit Seas. I can say that it's a very unique theme, and I can say that I like the OST personally, but honestly, those are the only really notable things that I can say about the map. Next up on our list is Forgotten Tombs, a map that was also rushed in development because it doesn't even have its own OST. And it's a very small map, and it's not very enticing. I believe it has the fewest buttons in the game out of any map, tied with Lost Woods. And honestly, those buttons don't have a lot going for them. The parkour is... some of it's really easy, and some parts of it are really hard for a normal map. The difficulty's all over the place. And honestly, it's just an awkward map, and it loses a lot of points for being the only map to not have its own unique OST. Next up, we're actually going to Insane, and our first Insane map for today is Abandoned Facility. I know a lot of people disagree with me on this one, but the reason why I put this map so low is its gameplay is some of the worst in the game for the average player. If you're a regular player and you go ahead and join a bunch of professionals or a bunch of really good players, they'll go ahead and get the first two buttons, and they'll get the third button, and then they might get the fourth button as well. And what does that leave you to do? Well, you go into the main room, you wait for the air tank, you get the air tank, and you swim into the other big room where you wait, and then you go in a path that is virtually identical to the path you just took, so it feels like you're not even going anywhere, and then you climb a truss to the end of the map. It feels like a much shorter map if you play it that way, and the sections you're missing out on aren't even that good as well. I personally don't think there's a lot going for the design of the map. The wallpaper towards the end is actually pretty neat, but I personally don't like it that much, and there's honestly not a lot going for this map. For being the only crazy map, or sorry, not crazy map, but for being the only insane map that really uses a water tank, it's not a good example at all. And finally, rounding out the D tier, we have Lava Tower. Now, I personally adore Lava Tower, but I understand that it is not that good of a map. While it has a lot of cool shortcuts and a lot of tricks you can pull off like that, there's nothing else going for the map. The map is really short, it's sometimes confusing for new players. It feels... it's just a tower. It's got nothing else surrounding it. So, it's the kind of stuff that you might see in... I know it might be a bit of a joke, calling it like a Jupiter's Tower of Heck, but yeah, that's what it feels like. It's just a mini tower, you're not going much of anywhere, and you just get to the top. It's not noteworthy in any other way. So starting off the C tier, which is going to be one of the bigger tiers, of course, we're going to start with Sky Sanctuary, if I can find it. So Sky Sanctuary is a neat little map. It kind of falls into the same category as Lava Tower, where the only really good thing it has going for it is a lot of tricky shortcuts for people to pull off. But it's got a pretty cool design, and it's not simply going in one direction, so it gets a few more points than Lava Tower, and that's why it kind of escapes D tier. Another similar map is going to be Cave System. Cave System is a very classic map, but I honestly think it's a little overrated, because it's kind of got the same abandoned facility feeling where you're pretty much waiting for one person to get a very far off button, and then they're left behind while everyone else is super far ahead already. And aside from that, it's cool to see the crystals and the cave design, and the ravine area is admittedly kind of pretty for how empty it is, but there isn't a lot going for this map, and it's a lot of walking around, to be honest. Next up, we have Wild Savannah, which is, in concept, it's a pretty cool map. There's a lot of cool things you do with wall jumps here, but the design of it is alright, and the gameplay is also alright, but it's a little bit confusing for new players. A lot of people I see going up to the first wall jump simply don't know what to do, and they end up dying for it, which makes it the hard map with arguably the highest death rate out of any of them. And other than that, it's honestly not that remarkable. It's just 2 big rooms, and you simply have to go through one and get to the top of the other. It doesn't feel like you're doing much there. Next, we have another insane map. I know I'm gonna get a lot of comments about this. It's Darkside Facility. A lot of people like playing Darkside Facility because it used to be the legendary insane map that was extremely difficult, and since that point it's just fallen really far from where it was. First of all, there's no longer the shaking and there's no longer the flashing lights in the second half of the map, which were 2 things that really defined the map and made it feel a lot more intense. And to be honest, a lot of the parkour on the map is just alright. Most of it is just hugging walls, and having gameplay where you're doing nothing but hugging a wall gets really old really quick. So, of course, that's mitigated by the map being a little bit short, but that doesn't stop it from being boring sometimes. Next up, we have Infiltration. Infiltration it's an alright map. There's a lot of... It's got that shortcut X factor. There's a lot of really cool shortcuts you can do on this map. But aside from that, it's honestly unremarkable. The gameplay is alright, the design's okay, the soundtrack for it is not bad, but it's not good. There's nothing really unique going on for it, and that's why I really can't put it any higher. There's nothing that really stands out compared to the next maps. Next we have Gloomy Manor, which I originally had a lot higher until one of my close friends pointed out that it doesn't feel like much of a flood escape map. Of course, with Gloomy Manor you can see the lava in some of the rooms, but it doesn't feel like a rising threat compared to that of other insane maps that are based on indoors. The lava's not moving at all, and even if it is, it's rising very slowly, which doesn't give that much of an adrenaline rush or an impact to the map. So it honestly feels like checking off, just going through each room, doing its little puzzle or getting its button, and then just moving on. It doesn't feel like too much of a flood escape map. It is kind of fun, and there's a lot of teamwork that goes on there. I like the teamwork factor in this map, but it's not... Otherwise, it's not that good, in my opinion. Next up is Axiom. Axiom is probably the map that I can say the least about because it feels like just a run-of-the-mill flood escape map. The gameplay is alright, the soundtrack is alright, the design is okay. It's not that unique, but there are some things that are cool about it. There's a couple of shortcuts, but it's nothing too crazy. It's an alright map. It's an alright map, and it goes in the middle of the alright tier, which is C tier. Next up, we have the other de facto swimming map on this list, which would be Crystal Caverns. I can put it up there in front of it. You go in front of Axiom, there you go. Crystal Caverns is a little bit boring on the gameplay, but the design is really cool, the theme is really cool, and there's the swimming section with all the stalactites, all the icicles, is super duper cool. I wish there were another map in Flood Escape that had like a really big scene that you get to swim through. And even if it's not that fun to swim through, it's really cool to look at. I know that's a bit of a dumb way to say it, but I honestly just love the scenery on this map. And even if it doesn't pose much of a challenge for a hard map, I definitely think it serves its duty pretty well as the de facto swimming map. Above Crystal Caverns, we have Mysterium, which is pretty much the cave map of the game. It's a lot more cramped than Cave System, though, and with that, some of the design and the architecture on this map feel a little bit scattershot, and it feels like it doesn't really mesh well together as a map. The map doesn't look too bad, and some of the gameplay is really cool. There's a lot of little shortcuts that you can do to make this map really quick and really fun. But some of the design is questionable, and it's not that memorable of a map, to be honest. If you were to try and list off all of the medium maps in the game, I'm pretty sure Mysterium would be missing from some people's lists if they try to do it by memory. Next up, we have Snowy Peaks. Snowy Peaks is an alright map. It's kind of like Axiom, where it doesn't have a lot going for it, but unlike Axiom, it's actually pretty fun in some sections. And some of the scenery is actually pretty good. It's a little bit basic on the terrain, but it's nice to be able to look around and see what's going on in the valley. It's pretty nice. Next up, we have, surprisingly, one of my favorite maps is Darkside Forest, rather. Darkside Forest is pretty cool because it's one of few maps that has you swim through acid, which is something that I feel like needs to be expanded upon for a lot of other maps. The gameplay is pretty good, and the design is alright, but the OST is pretty abysmal. And aside from that, it's a pretty average map. Aside from the fact that it's not average at all, it's a pretty average map, yep. Rounding off C tier, we have a map from my boy Eric. We have Oriental Grove, the de facto greenery map. It's pretty fun to go through, and there's a lot of thought put into how people will work together to get a lot of buttons pressed quickly. But to that extent, I feel like there are a few too many buttons. For example, there's the double crate stack with a button on top of it. It's not a group button, so it doesn't force you to wait at all. It's simply just something you jump by as you go to the next part of the map, so it's practically useless. It's a little bit counterintuitive, in my opinion. It looks pretty great, but a lot of the gameplay revolves around walking around. The only time you're really going up towards the beginning of the map is going to be on ladders, so there's not a lot of jumps you have to do. In fact, the few jumps you do have to do, there's only like 2 or 3 of towards the end. So, it could use a little bit of work when it comes to that. But it's an all-around alright map. I'm happy with where it is. Starting at the bottom of B tier, we're going to have Autumn Bridge, which is one of the 2 maps that is not yet in the game that I'm rating right here. Autumn Bridge looks very beautiful, and it plays very nicely sometimes, but other times it's extremely confusing, and a lot of the decisions made in the map are questionable. I'm sure the OST will be pretty good. I sadly can't factor it into consideration because I don't know the final OST of this map. But overall, it's pretty great, and if the gameplay were a little bit better, this map would definitely be somewhere in the A tier. Next up, we have Graveyard Cliffside, another very pretty map. This map is dripping in spooky themes, and it's honestly a lot of fun sometimes. But it's honestly a little on the short side. There's not too much going on with it, and it's again got that sort of wall-hugging gameplay that I really think is overused in some maps. Next up, we're going to go to Flood Escape 1, and we're going to go through Familiar Ruins, a map that I personally like the map because it has a lot to do with Flood Escape 1, which is a game I used to play a lot. But aside from its references, it looks pretty alright, and it plays pretty well, but it doesn't have too much else going for it. It's got a pretty cool OST, but I feel like the sort of ruins type map has been done to death a lot, which kind of brings down the map a little bit. I understand it was like the first to be the ruins map, but it still doesn't make it. Even if it's the first to be the ruins map, it's not going to be escaping my wrath, I suppose. So it's gonna sit here in B tier. Definitely not a bad placement, but if you wanted to be the best of the best, you're gonna have to aim higher than that. Poisonous Chasm, our first crazy on the list, goes right in front of Familiar Ruins. The reason why I kind of rate this lower than a lot of people might is because, well, of course, for both crazies, the OSTs are banging. It's not too impressive design-wise. It doesn't feel like you're going much of anywhere. Of course, with the way you go throughout the map and just like running throughout the map, it feels like you're covering a lot of ground. But design-wise, there isn't much of a change until the very, very end, so it doesn't feel like you're going much of anywhere. There's a lot of crates and a lot of wood planks that I wish would be a little bit more creative, but the gameplay is really fun, so I'm gonna go ahead and leave it in B tier. Next up, the map that came out the same day that Poisonous Chasm did. The new Northern Workshop looks fantastic, but it still suffers from all the gameplay problems of the old one. It's not that fun, and there's a lot of waiting around sometimes for other people to press the button. Like, a lot of waiting compared to a lot of other maps. And the OST's alright. Everything else about the map is pretty alright. I just wish the gameplay were a little bit better, because then I could place it higher in this tier list. Poisonous Valley comes up right after that. Poisonous Valley, I feel like, is ironically in the same boat as Poisonous Chasm, but it's got the cool ability to run through the center, which gives you an alternate gameplay path that I really enjoy. And there's a lot of creativity with some of the building going on here, even if it is a little bit wall-huggy in gameplay style. So I honestly enjoy this map a lot, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in B tier. Blood Island is the next map. I know some of you might be surprised to see it this high, but it is a pretty fun map to go through, and it's pretty smart design-wise. Like, it's not blowing my mind in any of the departments, but all around it feels like a very solid map, and it's very iconic, and I'm glad it made it this far up in the tier list. Marred Dreams shows up right here in B tier as well, and this map is gorgeous to look at. There's just a lot going on. I love the colors, and I love the way the acid rotates, and I love the lights in the sky. The design of this map is beautiful, and the OST is amazing as well. It's a shame that it's let down by its gameplay, which is a lot of walking around. A surprising amount of walking around, because you're doing it at the beginning of the map. It's kind of interrupted by the swimming sections, which is alright. But towards the end of the map, you're simply just walking across a bunch of bridges. There's nothing really special or cool about that. So it gets really boring by the second half of the map, and for that reason I can't put it any higher. Getting into the top 10 now, we have our final medium map on the list, which is going to be Construction Thrill. Construction Thrill looks pretty great. I love the OST, and it has some pretty fantastic theming. But similar to Marred Dreams, there's a lot of gameplay elements that need to be changed up a little bit. The map is very confusing still, even though it's had a few tweaks and changes. And if I wanted to put it any higher, it all rides on the gameplay being a little bit better. Next up, we have Lost Desert. Lost Desert is another very solid overall map. The design is alright, the gameplay is pretty good, but my favorite part about this map is that it actually feels like you're going on a journey and you're going somewhere. You start at the bottom of the desert and you climb your way up to the top, traversing over these dangerous little spires jutting out through the wall, and you finally make it across the gap and you can get into the temple area. And the temple area is also really cool. It's very basic design-wise, but I feel like it's a very fitting end to the map, and it looks pretty... It's a very fun, and it's pretty fitting for the end of the map, we'll say it that way. And finally, we're running out of maps here, but there's one more map that goes into the B tier, and that is going to be Sunken Citadel. Now, Sunken Citadel, for most people, might go into A tier, but for me, I'm afraid it just barely misses out for the fact that it's not very remarkable of a map. Despite the fact that it's the big blue map, the gameplay is pretty good. The design is okay in the first half, but towards the second half it gets very repetitive and very boring. And the OST it's alright. I personally don't like it. I wish it got its own custom OST, but there's nothing like super wrong about it aside from the fact that it loops in the middle of the map. And aside from that, it's just there's not enough going for it for me to put into A tier. Most of the maps in the A tier and the S tier have something really big and really flashy that I enjoy about them. And I sadly just can't say the same about Sunken Citadel. Alright, and here we are. We're getting into the A tier, and we only have just a few maps left. These are going to be the best of the best. I know some of you might already know the rest of the maps on the list, but some of you might be surprised as to where I put them at this point on. Starting off, we have Lost Woods going into A tier. A lot of people think Lost Woods is bland, but I honestly think to the contrary. The map looks pretty excellent. A lot of the ways, I especially love the way that the tree stump was built so that you can do shortcuts off of it, and it also feels, it's honestly just really fun to explore and run through. It feels like a map that you can explore, and I love that so much, despite the fact that it's an easy map and there's not a lot of difficulty to it. There's also a lot to do with shortcuts on this map. The shortcut potential is off the charts, and it's really fun to try and speed through the map with all your friends. And honestly, I couldn't put it any lower than A tier. Next up, we have Beneath the Ruins. Beneath the Ruins, I know some people would definitely put it in S tier, and it has a lot going for it. It's got a lot of I love the thematic of this map. I love some of the gameplay. The design is pretty great, and just the way it kind of takes you on this winding journey through what's left of the Flood Escape 1 facility. I really enjoy that. The only problem is that there are some sections that are confusing and some sections that are annoying to play through. And aside from these little sections, the OST is a bop, the design is really great, and I love this map through and through. It's just those little things that keep it out of S tier. Next up, in the top 5 now, we have our final hard map for the list, and that is going to be Sedimentary Temple. I know a lot of people think this map is unremarkable, but this map is honestly very smart, and I just love the sort of journey it takes you through this temple. It starts off in this lower section, and then as you progress through the map, you get to see how the lower section of the map is flooded with quicksand. It honestly tells a bit of a story, and the OST is just such a ride. I love the OST for this map. And it's honestly just an overall solid map. It's missing an X factor that would put it in S tier, but it's just a big solid map, and I love it so much. And the final map that I'm putting in A tier, which is also the final easy map on today's list, the newest map in Flood Escape 2, it's going to be Buried Oasis. And Buried Oasis is an overall fantastic map. It's beautiful to go through, it's honestly really fun to play, and it's such just a wondrous map. The OST, oh my gosh, I love the OST for this map. It's just a few small annoyances that put it out of S tier for me. Stuff with the gameplay, such as in the first room, that I would tweak personally. But honestly, for reaching the top 5 already, I think this map is wonderful already, and I don't think it needs to be changed at all. And we're getting into the top 3 maps. Do you guys remember what maps are left? Well, it'll be a little bit tricky because one of them actually isn't in the game yet. That's a spoiler. I shouldn't have said that yet. You know what? I don't care. I'm just gonna talk about Blue Moon right now. Blue Moon. Oh my gosh, I love Blue Moon so much. It's just such a fun map overall. The gameplay is such a rush, and it's so fun to go through every single time. There's a ton of shortcuts that you can try and master that make this map even more rewarding to play and master. And the design of it is freaking crazy. There's just, if you stop to look around, you can see all the volcanoes and stuff. All the terrain was super meticulously put together. The facility itself is also so cool to look at. I mean, you can probably see it in the starting image there. There's just so much going on this map, and I love it so much. The OST is really, really cool as well. It's honestly one of the few OSTs in this game that I would listen to outside of the map. And that in and of itself is probably one of the biggest compliments I can give to any OST in this map. Man on the Vola just knocked it out of the park. Next up, we have the one map that I alluded to earlier. We have Magmatic Mines. Magmatic Mines, I'm putting it this high up here even though it's not in the game because it's honestly just on the same level as Blue Moon. The gameplay is so good, the design is so detailed and so beautiful. And the OST, I understand it's going to be a little bit different than what it is right now. But if the original creator of the OST, Blasty, and Novola worked together to make this OST the best it possibly can be, I'm sure I wouldn't have any complaints at all about the OST. It would be so amazing. And it's a lot of faith to put into one map, but it's already 99% of the way there. Just let me have this one. It's that good. And finally, the last map. The best map in Flood Escape 2. I'm sure you already know what it is, but just for the build-up. In my opinion, the best map in Flood Escape 2 is Sinking Ship. What makes Sinking Ship so amazing? Sinking Ship transcends the concept of a map and becomes a story on its own. The way that the OST and the gameplay and the design are all meshed together as one. As you frantically go through the lower halls of the ship before the acid starts rising rapidly, the frantic climbing section, the top of the map that feels like a bit of a relief, but not much of one as you see the crates tumbling and the lava rising. This map tells a story. It's not just a map. And it's awesome in every way because of that. For that reason, I honestly think it's the best map in the game, even if it's not perfect in the design. Even if there are some aspects of the gameplay that could use minor tweaks. The fact that this map meshed together so well to tell just a really frantic and fast-paced story that you get to play through is the reason why it's the best map in Flood Escape 2. So that's it for the tier list. I understand some of these placements might be a little bit questionable, but again, I want you guys to tell me about it in the comment section below. I love hearing from you guys, and I read every comment, and I will try to respond to every comment on this video. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Until then, this has been Occida, and I'll see you soon.